When sociologists study a specific issue in society, it's important for them to first define exactly what it is they are studying. This ensures that they and their readers stay on topic and don't get sidetracked by competing definitions. However, it is also a useful method for identifying how social issues are defined by society and how those definitions influence social responses to them. Homelessness is a useful example to demonstrate this.
Just life hanging by a string.
There is no single, universally accepted definition of homelessness. Definitions vary based on who is doing the defining. The general public would generally define homelessness as sleeping rough, literally sleeping on the streets or in a park, essentially without a roof. In the academic literature, and among many organisations working with people who are homeless, this situation is more likely to be defined as rooflessness. It is indeed a form of homelessness, but it is not the only one. A person may be houseless. They may have access to shelter, such as a car, a shed, or a tent. This is still a form of homelessness. To be without a home doesn't necessarily mean to be without a roof. Similarly, many homeless people are placed in hostels or B&Bs. They may live in a squat or be sofa surfing. These individuals have access to a house, or something like a house. They are neither roofless nor houseless, but they're still homeless. We may refer to this situation as precariously housed. Some individuals may find themselves facing eviction. They may be on the verge of homelessness. Again, this situation might best be defined as precariously housed. In order for us to understand homelessness, it is important for us to recognise that this is a very broad term. Someone who is homeless may be experiencing rooflessness or houselessness, or they may be precariously housed. Indeed, they may experience all three over a period of time. For example, precarious housing may lead to houselessness and later to rooflessness. And an individual may experience precarious housing without progressing to houselessness. They still experienced a kind of homelessness. Lack of a comprehensive definition, and the reality that no one definition can clearly encapsulate the variety of situations that homelessness can take, can impact on responses to the issue. For example, government policy that defines homelessness simply as rough sleeping or rooflessness will do little to support those experiencing houselessness or precarious housing. Such policy may be influenced by organisations and services who work with and support people who are homeless. For example, a team designed to support people sleeping rough are likely to present homelessness as rooflessness. This definition may be reinforced through fundraising material or newspaper columns and lobbying attempts to increase funding from the government. Similarly, a homeless hostel may reinforce a definition that reflects the situation of their service users, and a local council may wish to define it in a way that conforms more easily to their bureaucratic processes. The result is not only a different definition of homelessness, but definitions that compete. The definitions that are most successfully reinforced are likely to dominate perceptions of homelessness in the public, to influence government policy, and therefore to impact on the experience of homelessness itself.
Just life hanging by a string.
When sociologists study a social issue, they often begin by applying a sociological perspective. This helps to frame the issue and highlight particular aspects of it. For example, structural perspectives such as functionalism and Marxism help us to focus on the role of social institutions and structure in shaping our social experiences, On the other hand, perspectives such as symbolic interactionism help us to see how our interactions produce those social structures. All perspectives are useful because they help us to isolate specific factors that shape social life. At the same time, all perspectives are limited because none of them account for all of the factors that combine to produce the social world. In exploring the application of sociological perspectives to homelessness, we find that, as with most other social issues, a range of perspectives are needed if we are to gain a holistic understanding of the situation. One of the most dominant perspectives in the debate around homelessness is structuralism. From this point of view, homelessness is a result of social structure and the inequalities that are inherent within it. For example, many organisations and advocates working towards reducing homelessness argue that it results primarily from a lack of available housing. The solution includes a process of prioritising house building and access to social housing. Similarly, this perspective argues that an expansion of the welfare state, access to education, and a more equitable economic system will help to resolve homelessness. These are all fair claims, and research indicates that such approaches would have a positive impact. However, there is a distinct lack of consideration for personal agency in this explanation. Some people become homeless despite access to housing, and many people become homeless after a long journey of personal and cultural experiences. Our personal experiences and individual interactions with others impact the way we view ourselves and on our cultural practices. Symbolic interactionist explanations, such as labelling theory, show how being defined as homeless or an addict or mentally ill often results in an individual defining themselves that way. They may seek out others who share the label and begin to engage in subcultures where they feel they belong. Street culture may become normalized. It becomes a normal and familiar way of life for an individual who feels alienated and rejected by mainstream society. In this case, the availability of housing or the wider economy is unlikely to be the only or even the dominant factor in influencing the situation. Instead, issues such as social exclusion, labeling and stigmatization, culture, and the construction of the self are important factors to consider and address. Megan Ravenhill argues that structuration theory probably comes closest to encapsulating the complexities of homelessness. It accounts for both personal agency and social structure by framing individuals as having the power to act and resist social forces within the limitations placed on them by social structures. This allows us to understand, for example, people who have experienced triggers that are known to lead to homelessness but were able to avoid homelessness. In other words, homelessness is not the product of a fixed trajectory. Social structures place limitations on our opportunities and they contribute to shaping our experiences, but individuals have the power to act within that structure. This results in varying outcomes for different individuals. Nonetheless, understanding these relationships between structure and agency in the context of homelessness requires us to explore theories and ideas that are grounded in theories of both structure and agency.
Just life hanging by a string.
Becoming homeless is a process. It is rarely a result of a single unfortunate event. Factors leading to homelessness often begin long before homelessness occurs. Issues often begin in childhood, and on average, they start to become present around 7 to 9 years before homelessness occurs. These triggers include, among others, abuse in childhood, experience of living in care, running away from home, domestic violence, and truancy from school. For the majority of people who become homeless, their history presents an accumulation of triggers over time rather than one single incident. Childhood trauma often leads to difficulties forming healthy relationships, trusting others, and coping with the demands of everyday life. Many homeless people suffer with mental health issues such as PTSD and depression, and some turn to substance abuse as a coping mechanism. Experiences of living in care homes and serving time in prison sometimes leads to institutionalization. The result is that on discharge, some individuals struggle to cope outside of the institution. They may feel safer, for example, living in a homeless hostel, and may be afraid or feel unable to manage independent living. The work of both Erving Goffman and Michel Foucault provide clear and convincing explanations for the process and effects of institutionalization. Ravenhill also challenges the assumption that homelessness primarily affects those from working class backgrounds. She points to data showing that a surprising proportion of homeless individuals grew up in middle class families. One explanation for this is that working class individuals develop stronger coping strategies for dealing with the challenges of poverty, and that middle class individuals may struggle to adapt to the experience of downward social mobility.
Just life hanging by a string.
Ravenhill identifies a vibrant and complex homeless culture. This counterculture is made up of people who are alienated from and exist on the margins of mainstream society. It offers individuals a sense of belonging. Many homeless people report feeling anonymous in mainstream society, but known and included as part of the homeless community, where they develop friendships, feel safe, and are able to interact with people they relate to. As with any other culture, becoming a member of a homeless culture is a learned process. The initial experience is often frightening, but newcomers tend to be befriended by a guide who initiates them into the routines and expectations of the culture and how to survive in this world. Friendships can become intense, and terms like brother are used to describe each other. Such strong bonds help with the survival and the emotional challenges of experiencing homelessness. Status is achieved on the streets too. Surviving on the streets for a long time, experiencing things like serious addiction and abuse from members of the public can be seen as a badge of honour. Violence becomes a regular part of life and is embedded into the culture. Violent conflict over money or territory or relationships is quite common. Acclimatizing to this is part of the process of becoming a member of homeless culture. It's necessary for survival. Subcultures develop within the homeless culture. Separate, overlapping groups such as street drinkers, drug users, loners, and day centre groupies develop. As with any other subculture, this further reinforces members as part of a group and strengthens feelings of belonging, while further alienating them from mainstream society. The homeless culture, arising as a means of survival and coping, begins to act as a barrier for leaving the situation. To leave the streets behind is to cut ties with your brothers, to give up your status, and to abandon your daily routines. A culture must be unlearned to be replaced with a new, mainstream culture that has previously abandoned and alienated you. At the same time, the triggers that led to homelessness in the first place are unlikely to be completely resolved. Resettlement, leaving homelessness, is a major challenge for many of the people who attempt it. There is a vast network of organisations that work to support people who are homeless and to tackle the causes of homelessness. These organisations include charities, government initiatives, and researchers. There's an ironic pressure impacting these organisations. Whilst genuinely aiming to support those who are homeless, they rely upon the perpetuation of homelessness for their existence. The eradication of homelessness would result in the eradication of this industry and the jobs that exist within it. This is not to say that there is any deliberate attempt to perpetuate homelessness. However, Ravenhill does point out that some organisational practices are driven by these pressures. For example, she points to a process of client hogging, where services fail to refer an individual to a more appropriate service in order to keep beds filled and funding secured. Similarly, services may hog an easy client instead of referring them elsewhere and risking supporting someone who is more intensive. Services may also implement blanket bans, preventing individuals from entering services due to their behaviour and resulting in them being forced to sleep on the streets. As discussed earlier, homeless organisations have the power to frame definitions of homelessness. They are likely to frame the causes of homelessness and the experiences homeless people contend with in order to benefit their own specific services. This can impact on public and government perceptions of homelessness, which can lead to policy that is grounded in limited definitions. Pathways out of homelessness are an assault course of structural, psychological, and practical obstacles. The process must begin with a personal decision to change. This is often initiated by experiences such as hitting rock bottom or enduring a traumatic event. There is sometimes a narrow and limited window of opportunity that is often missed. Once the decision is taken, the individual has to attempt to navigate a complicated system of organisations, conflicting advice, and limited options for accommodation. Hostels can be chaotic, unpleasant places to stay, and some people feel more comfortable on the streets. They may find themselves feeling housed rather than homed. Benefits are often delayed, and this can result in individuals immediately accumulating debt and facing eviction. Another major obstacle is the need to sever ties with their friends and remove themselves from a culture that had offered a sense of belonging, acceptance, and safety. Individuals begin to feel isolated and alone, and they may struggle to reintegrate with mainstream culture. Coping strategies have to be unlearned and old traumas readdressed. Leaving homelessness is really hard.